and welcome to today's episode brought to you by Holy Reads, the world's first Christian book summary app. With Holy Reads, you can discover more powerful insights and summaries from 1,000 plus Christian books in under 20 minutes, whether you want to read or listen. I'm your host, Michael, and today we're exploring The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. This book takes us on a journey to investigate the historical evidence for Jesus, moving from skepticism to faith through careful examination. Strobel's background as a journalist and Yale-trained lawyer gives him a unique approach to answering critical questions about Jesus' life, divinity, and resurrection. Strobel begins The Case for Christ by recounting his own journey from atheism to faith. Initially, he was skeptical of Christianity, dismissing it as a myth. However, when his wife became a Christian, Strobel decided to examine the evidence for himself, using his investigative skills to scrutinize the claims of the Gospels. He set out to determine whether the historical Jesus, as presented in the Bible, was truly divine, and whether the resurrection could be a credible event. This investigation sets the tone for the entire book, inviting readers to explore the evidence with an open mind. Strobel interviews renowned experts in various fields, including history, medicine, and psychology, to uncover the facts. His approach is both rigorous and relatable, making it accessible for believers, skeptics, and those curious about the evidence for Christianity. A central aspect of Strobel's case involves examining the eyewitness testimony in the Gospels. Eyewitness accounts are powerful in legal cases, and Strobel applies this principle to the New Testament. He argues that the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, are either direct or indirect eyewitness accounts of Jesus' life and ministry. Skeptics often question the authenticity of these texts, but Strobel finds that early sources support the traditional authorship of the Gospels. For example, if the Gospels were forgeries, the writers would likely have attributed them to more prominent apostles like Peter or James rather than Matthew and Mark. The names chosen suggest authenticity, as they were not the most influential figures, which would have lent credibility if that were the goal. Through interviews with biblical scholars, Strobel learns that the Gospels meet many criteria for reliability and accurately reflect historical events. One question Strobel addresses is whether the Gospels have been reliably preserved over the centuries. Some argue that these texts have been altered, but Strobel discovers evidence to the contrary. The New Testament manuscripts are among the best preserved ancient texts, with thousands of copies available in Greek, Latin, Syriac, and Coptic. Even if all Greek copies were lost, scholars could still reconstruct the New Testament from translations in other languages. Strobel learns that variations in the texts are minor, mostly spelling errors or word choices that don't change the meaning. This level of preservation far surpasses that of other historical texts, such as those by historians like Tacitus and Plutarch, whose works survive in fewer copies. This evidence supports the reliability of the New Testament as a historical document, strengthening the case for Jesus as presented in the Gospels. Strobel also examines non-Christian sources that mention Jesus. Historical figures like Josephus, a Jewish historian, and Tacitus, a Roman historian, provide external validation of the Gospel accounts. Josephus, for example, refers to James, the brother of Jesus, who was called the Christ, while Tacitus describes the spread of Christianity and even references Jesus' crucifixion. These non-Christian sources are significant because they confirm key details about Jesus' life and death from independent perspectives. The fact that these writers, who were not followers of Jesus, mention him and his influence lends additional credibility to the gospel narratives. This external corroboration helps reinforce the view that Jesus was a real historical figure whose impact reached beyond the Christian community. One of the questions Strobel explores is whether Jesus truly saw himself as divine. Through his research, Strobel finds that Jesus' claim to divinity is woven throughout the Gospels. Jesus frequently refers to himself as the Son of Man, a title that may sound humble but actually refers to a divine figure from Daniel 7:13-14, who is given authority by God. By using this title, Jesus identifies himself with this divine figure, subtly claiming a role of cosmic importance. In John's Gospel, these claims become even more explicit, with statements like, "I and the Father are one," John 10:30. Strobel learns that even in the earliest Christian traditions, such as Paul's letters, Jesus is recognized as divine, which supports the argument that this belief wasn't a later addition to Christian doctrine, but an integral part of Jesus' identity. Strobel also considers the psychological evidence for Jesus' claims. If Jesus truly believed he was God, does that suggest he was delusional? To answer this question, Strobel interviews a psychologist who explains that people with delusions typically exhibit other symptoms such as erratic behavior, paranoia, or distorted reality. However, Jesus' teachings reflect wisdom, coherence, and profound understanding of human nature. Strobel concludes that Jesus shows no signs of mental illness. His interactions, teachings, and relationships all reflect a healthy mind and balanced personality. This insight challenges the notion that Jesus' claim to divinity was a sign of delusion, suggesting instead that his self-perception was grounded in reality. One common argument against the resurrection is the swoon theory, the idea that Jesus didn't actually die but merely fainted on the cross. Strobel investigates this theory by consulting a medical expert who describes the physical effects of crucifixion. Jesus endured severe flogging, blood loss, and eventually died from asphyxiation and cardiac arrest, making it impossible for him to have survived the ordeal. The medical evidence overwhelmingly supports the conclusion that Jesus died on the cross. The idea that he simply fainted and later revived lacks credibility given the extreme trauma he endured. This understanding is essential to Strobel's case because it confirms that Jesus truly died, making the resurrection all the more remarkable. The resurrection is the central claim of Christianity, and Strobel devotes significant time to examining the evidence for it. He explores the historicity of the empty tomb, noting that if Jesus' body had remained in the grave, it would have been impossible for Christianity to gain traction. Strobel finds that early sources, including Paul's letters and the Gospels, consistently report the empty tomb and resurrection appearances. One of the most striking pieces of evidence is that women were the first witnesses to the resurrection. In the ancient world, women's testimonies were considered unreliable. If the resurrection story were fabricated, it would have been unlikely to feature women as the primary witnesses. The presence of women as witnesses adds credibility to the account, suggesting that the gospel writers were more concerned with truth than with social credibility. Strobel also considers the dramatic transformation of Jesus' disciples. Before the resurrection, they were fearful and in hiding. Afterward, they became bold preachers of the gospel, willing to face persecution and death for their faith. Strobel argues that such a profound change is best explained by their genuine belief in the resurrection. If the resurrection were a lie, it's unlikely that all the disciples would have been willing to suffer for it. The transformation of individuals like Peter and Paul, who initially opposed or denied Jesus, supports the authenticity of their belief. This transformation of Jesus' followers is powerful circumstantial evidence, as it points to their conviction that they had truly encountered the risen Christ. Finally, Strobel examines the broader impact of the resurrection on history. The rapid expansion of the early church is a testament to the power of the resurrection message. Within a few generations, Christianity spread across the Roman Empire, despite intense opposition and persecution. This movement's endurance and growth point to the credibility of its core message, that Jesus died and rose again. Strobel notes that the Church's rapid expansion, coupled with the willingness of early Christians to face persecution, is circumstantial evidence supporting the resurrection. These believers didn't just follow a philosophy, they were devoted to a risen Savior. This phenomenon, which has no parallel in history, offers a compelling argument for the truth of the resurrection. Thank you for joining us in exploring The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. This investigation into the historical evidence for Jesus offers a powerful case for faith, grounded in both intellectual rigor and personal reflection. Strobel's journey from skepticism to belief reminds us that faith in Jesus is not blind, but supported by evidence. This podcast was brought to you by Holy Reads, the world's first Christian book summary app. If you enjoyed this episode, download Holy Reads to discover more powerful insights and summaries from 1,000+ Christian books. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for more reflections and book summaries to guide your faith journey. Until next time, may you be encouraged to explore your faith with confidence, knowing that the truth about Jesus withstands even the closest scrutiny.